I'm now looking at the rest of my life in prison. I'm going to escape. One way or the other, I'm getting out.
I had heard of the movie Midnight Express, so I just watched it for the first time. I do have a lot of questions, but is it possible that, you could maybe just explain and I could ask as we go along if that's not too.
Yeah, anything you like. And again, once I get babbling about this, you have to cut me off. I have my wife around at a party or something, and she'll like step on my foot or give me an elbow, like, you're revving into the red zone, slow down, because
Oh,
it
I tell
gets
people all the time, you
it's
just have to
weird.
walk away. I
Yeah,
tell people when they're talking to me, I'm like, "Listen, bro, you're just gonna have to walk away because I'm just
right,
gonna keep talking.
right.
You're not
That's
gonna
how I
offend me."
am. So
You know?
interject, stop me, focus me anywhere you want, and literally any question you want to ask. I jokingly used to say to people, "Ask me something I've never been asked before," because I've
Right.
done this, since the moment I was busted in 1970. I escaped in 1975. I stepped off the plane at Kennedy Airport into 100 reporters. I've been in jail for 5 years. My big media event was like the mail coming through the door once a week, if you got mail. And suddenly I got 100 people asking me questions and yelling, and it never stopped. I'm still
Mhm.
doing it. My idea of getting out of jail eventually was I wanted just a nice quiet place. In fact, my dream was to go to a little beach in south of Rabat in Morocco, where I always visioned I'd have a nice quiet place and a woman who just wanted to make love and swim and eat fruit. And when I escaped, that little beach in Morocco was in the middle of a war zone and they literally were fighting back and forth. So, expectations always lead me to a fall anyway. But getting
So,
home was weird. Stepping off the plane, suddenly everybody's talking to me.
right. Well, can we start at the beginning? Like, just
Sure.
start like where you were born, how you ended up
Okay.
in Turkey, right?
I was born in the Bronx, 1947. Jesus, I can't believe I'm that old. I wake up, I keep thinking I'm 18 till I look in the mirror or start to move. And it's like, oh, no, no, no. That was a long time ago. A friend of mine came back from Istanbul. This was 1969. His dad did travel the world as a wine distributor. My friend came back from Istanbul and he had a little chunk of hash, best we had ever smoked, hidden in his money belt. And we smoked it, and he said, "It's cheap, it's easy. They sell it right on the street." It's like, really? And I started thinking, and I was working as a child psychiatric aide. How I got that job is just too long a story. At the local hospital in Milwaukee, at Marquette University, where I went to school, journalism school. Always wanted to be a writer. Jack London is my hero. And wandering around the hospital, I passed what was like the cast room. And I see a doctor dipping a roll of plaster of Paris tape into water and wrapping it around this patient's broken leg. And an idea came to me. And 2 weeks later, I was in an Istanbul hotel room. I had 2 kilos of hash plaques, best incredible hash, taped to my leg. And I was dipping the roll of plaster of Paris tape into water, wrapping it around the hash, and watching as this rough, bulky, but beautiful white cast took shape. I spent the rest of the night smoking hash, watching the cast dry, and next day I'm clomping across the Istanbul airport up to the customs guy with this cast on my. I was 21 the first time I smuggled. I actually smuggled 4 times, 3 successful, and I couldn't say that when I got home and got busted on the fourth. I should have stopped when I was ahead, but who does that, especially when you're young? And I smuggled, and the fourth trip in October 1970, the PLO had just hijacked and blown up some jets out in the Jordanian desert. The beginning of all this airport security and control. Before this, nobody got searched boarding an airplane. You could walk on the
Right.
plane with a chicken under your arms. Nobody bothered you. Now they were bothering people. They were searching, and saunter out there. I've got 2 kilos of hash plaques strapped all over my body. I'm real skinny, so it fit, and I put a sweater on. And I got to the airport, and I actually went out the day before to watch people. You could used to be able to do that, go up on the observation deck and watch people going through customs and getting on the plane. Not now, of course, but I went out the day before because I'm thinking airport security has got to be increased since they just blew up these jets out in the desert. And I watched people going through customs. Nobody was getting searched. They didn't have any metal detectors. I figured piece of cake. And I actually headed back to this English girl who was studying belly dancing here in exotic, erotic Istanbul, instead of going up on the observation deck as I planned and watching people till they actually got on the plane. So next day, I show up. I've got my 2 kilos of hash black strapped under my sweater, and I go through customs. Nobody searches me. I'm sitting downstairs in the waiting room, which is kind of odd, but it was okay because, James Bond, I'm through customs. I'm feeling fine. Again, this is my fourth trip. I figure I'm invincible. After the first trip with the hash and the cast on my leg, I could do anything. I was invincible. So I kept doing it. And suddenly I'm in the downstairs room on my fourth trip. And then they put us on a bunch of old buses to take us out to the plane, which is a little bit out on the airport, which again is a little bit odd, but no problem. And this little old lady from Chicago is talking to me, telling me about her grandson who's stationed here in the Air Force and how much she likes Istanbul. And then the bus stops, and I look out the window, and there's Turkish soldiers with rifles surrounding the plane. And they've got a long brown table set up in front of the boarding ramp with 2 cops on each side, where apparently they're going to search people getting on the plane. Like, what? I was so surprised. They could have knocked me over. I dropped to the floor pretending I've lost my passport because I need time to think. And then this little old lady says, "Your passport, it's right there in your top pocket." It's like, thanks. And I'm out the door, and all of these men are funneling down around the table on both sides, and there's nowhere to go. I can't unstrap this shit. I got it all over my chest, and all I could do, and I couldn't get back to the airport, all I could do is bluff my way onto the plane. That's where I've gotten myself at this point.
Real quick,
Yeah.
was in the movie you were with your girlfriend?
Yeah, they did that
No.
so they'd establish her beforehand. No, I was not. I was by myself each of these times.
Okay.
Um, I tried to bluff my way. They were moving down, and I kind of moved through the bunch of men, and I circle around the first cop, and then I'm sidling past the second cop, putting my yoga book back into my shoulder pack as if I've already been searched, and I point, indicating the first cop got me. And just at that point, the other cop here finished with another passenger and caught my cop's eye, who points to me like, "Did you search him?" And the first cop shakes his head no, and the grip on my elbow tightens as this nervous young cop out here looking for terrorists. They're not looking for hash smugglers. He realizes I just lied to him. So he pulls
Mhm.
me aside and he gestures, "Lift your arms," which I do, and he starts to search me. And he hits the hard plaques under my arms. And he keeps going, and he hits the hard plaques taped to my waist, and he keeps going down my legs. I find myself praying, "Please, Jesus, get me out of here. I will never do this shit again." But this is a Muslim country. I'm praying to the wrong God anyway. And this time, the cop comes up and he hits the hard plaques under my arms, and he freezes, and his eyes widen, and he drops to the ground, picks his pistol out, and starts screaming, "Bomba! Bomba!" And all the soldiers bring their rifles down, and the people are screaming and collapsing, and I'm frozen there, waiting to be shot. The cop, the cop was really freaked, and the shaking gun is pressing into my stomach as this young cop lifts up my sweater, and it takes him a moment to realize it's not a mad bomber wired with explosives, just some idiot out here smuggling hash. I can see the tension go out of his face. It's like, "Hashish," and he screams. He says, "Hashish, hashish," and he pulls the gun from my stomach, and all the soldiers put their rifles down, so relieved, and everybody's so relieved except me, because that was the beginning of a very long 5 years. They dragged me into the police station at the airport, and it was crowded with soldiers and cops, and they ripped the hash from my chest, they ripped the hash from around my waist, and they pile it up out front, and all these soldiers are there, and the couple of cops start talking to me, and name William Hayes, William, and they write that down. And the door opens, another cop with 2 stars on his shoulder comes in, and "What's your name?" "William Hayes." And they started writing this down. It was the beginning of what was the most bizarre and difficult 5 years of my life, but also it was the worst and the best thing that ever happened to me. Prison life was so easy for me. Marquette University Journalism School, the 60s. I love the 60s. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, free love, no AIDS. I love the 60s. It was the start of a very long 5 years.
Um, so, did you realize at that moment like, I'm in a lot of trouble. Like, this is a big, big deal here.
I knew there's those moments where you literally know your life is hanging in the balance. When I tried to get onto the plane and I made that first step, when this cop grabbed my elbow, I knew this is the moment where my life is hanging in the balance. And once he hit the plaque, once he searched me and hit the plaques, and everybody was screaming, and uh, it was a very rude awakening to reality. That's how stupid I was. That's because, again, I got away with it the first time. I told you I put a cast on my leg and I clomped through customs in Istanbul with this cast on my leg with all the hash in it. When I got to New York, I was clomping across New York Airport, heading towards the U.S. Customs, and I see a little trail of white flakes, and I realize my cast is crumbling beneath me. But they just stamped my passport, waved me through. Yay, I made it. Not quite the flawless planning I'd hoped for, but now I'm back and I'm selling hash to all my friends and making a chunk of money and getting laid a lot. You talk about the summer of love. Um, I was 6 months later, I went back to did another one because I'd run out of money. I was making, I don't know, it was about $5,000 is the profit I made off this, which doesn't seem like a lot of money for the risk I was taking. But again, I was 21 and that was a lot of money back then. And I was footloose, fancy free. I didn't have any obligations. I wasn't married, a lot of girlfriends, but I wasn't married. I didn't have anybody back waiting for me. Uh, I get lost when I start
Yeah,
telling
you had been caught, and I asked if you realize how serious the charges were.
Yeah,
So they had caught you. They asked you your name and everything. So now you're actually incarcerated at this point.
yeah.
How long before you go in front of a judge?
I was at the airport for a couple of hours. Then they took me to temporary prison, which I spent the day and that night, and my first night in jail in this old beat up Sultanahmet jail prison. And the next day, they took me out to the big prison where I spent almost 4 years before I transferred off that prison to an island prison. I bribed everything in Turkey is bakshish, probably
Yeah,
all
yeah.
jail. Bakshish. You have money, you can buy anything. You can do virtually anything in prison. And I had money, and I arranged with my friend, the prison doctor, who I'd been bribing for the last 4 years, making friends with. The American consul would come out for visits and bring me cartons of Marlboro, which were forbidden in Turkey back then for some reason. And I would take the carton of Marlboro and give them to one of the big head guards, which means we're kind of friends. And then, if you and I are in jail and they find something like a piece of hash on the floor, and I've been bribing the guard every couple of weeks with a carton of Marlboro, and you haven't, guess whose hash that is? It's
Right.
yours. Everything. Well, everything in jail works like that. So it seemed to me that it was going to work okay until I got busted and I got thrown in the jail. And then everybody worked for me. I had lawyers from the United States eventually would come and work, and people kept thinking, well, you'll get out because there was a big article in American papers about an American can buy his way out of any prison sentence in Turkey, which wasn't true to start with, and certainly wasn't true for me. And again, this was the beginning of the war on drugs. I got busted because Richard Nixon started the war on drugs and went pressuring Turkey and all of the other countries that the US gave money to, which is everybody, to increase their drug penalties. So I stepped right into the worst place I could possibly be. And there I was with 4 kilos of hash, 2 kilos of hash, 4.4 pounds of hash, the best hash. The guy I got it from in Istanbul was a Kurd. That's part of the ethnic groups that are in Turkey. In fact,
Mhm.
Kurds say they're not Turks. They are. They live in Turkey, but they're ethnic, and they live in the eastern part of Turkey, sort of in the highland, the mountains, and they grow the best hash. That's the climate, the soil, everything is like that. So I had the best hash you could get out of Turkey. When I brought my hash back, I went to Marquette University in Milwaukee. I went to Milwaukee. Everybody was like, "What?" They couldn't believe how good this hash was. People said, "Well, how do you go about selling it?" You don't have to go about. You just sit there. People come to you. The word got out. Crazy. That was my nickname for some reason at college. People say, Crazy's back. And I'm a chess player. So I have a chess set. I open up, there's a board you lift out where the pieces are. I was cutting these chunks of hash. I could cut it. I could balance it right down to a gram. I knew perfectly. So I cut all these chunks of hash, put them in the bottom of my chess set, went to the park. I would sit in the park playing chess with people and lifting these little grams of hash out and selling them and taking the money and my hash. I kept it. I kept my hash and my money in a safety deposit box in the bank. I didn't know how to write a check. I literally had never written a check at this point. So I had my cash and my hash in a safety deposit box, and it worked very well the first time. After 6 months, I was running out of money, so I went back and did it again. Second trip, I didn't use the cast since it was crumbling underneath me by the time I got back on my first trip. I just taped it to my body and jumped on the fabled Orient Express train and chugged out of Istanbul, heading west towards Paris. And 6 months later, I was out of money again, and I went back for my third trip. By now, I've fallen in love with Istanbul. I love Istanbul. People say, well, you must hate Turkey, because I actually don't. I loved Istanbul. I had a Turkish girlfriend. I love the city. I love the hash. I'm not real happy with their government now for the last 20 years with this authoritarian dictator that they have, Erdogan, but that's a whole nother issue.
You ever read a headline and think, wait, that's not what I read earlier? Or hear a story that was covered two totally different ways and think, I wonder which one's telling the truth. We all know the news can be biased. Algorithms push stories that they think you want to see, and some outlets spin stories to fit a certain agenda. It's exhausting trying to figure out what's real, what's exaggerated, and what's just straight up misinformation. That's why I use Ground News. It's a news platform that doesn't just show you the headlines, it shows you the whole story. It gathers articles from across the political spectrum, tells you the bias of each source, and even lets you compare how different outlets are framing the same event. For example, the recent federal health agency layoffs. Left-leaning news described the layoffs as a major crisis, calling them a bloodbath that could harm important public health work like tracking diseases. On the other hand, right-leaning news saw the layoffs as positive change. They called it a win-win for taxpayers, which could save $1.8 billion a year. Both sides agree the layoffs and changes were happening, but they strongly disagree on what it meant. Ground News lets you compare these side by side so you can actually see the bias and decide for yourself what to believe. You can also see things like how news sources are covering a particular story, political leaning of news outlets, and the blind spot feed, where you can see stories that are disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. In a world of clickbait and echo chambers, having access to all perspectives is more important than ever. That's why I love Ground News. It helps me cut through the noise and stay truly informed. And right now you can get 40% off the Vantage plan for unlimited access. Just hit the link in my description, ground.news/inside, and start seeing the news differently today.
Back then, it was in a magic place, a magic time. I smuggled it the third time. 6 months later, I should have stopped. I went back. And that was what I told you from the beginning. The PLO had just hijacked the jets and started all this airport control. That now it's normal. But back then, nobody did that. Nobody searched you getting on a plane.
Right. So how long were you locked up before like the embassy showed up or your parents found out, and did they get you an attorney?
I was locked. They busted me at the airport. For a couple of hours, I was out there dealing with stuff and getting searched and strip searched and all the weird shit that happens at the beginning. And then they the next day they chained me up and took me to the big prison, the smuggle, a big place, and I spent my first 3.5, 4 years in that prison. At first, I was in an individual cell, 12 feet long, stone, little hole in the floor in the back for your toilet. Always have to keep a can or a rock over it, keep the rats from scurrying up at night. They do anyway. And I hated that little cell. I hated being locked in at night. I hated being in that little cage. And then about the beginning of my second year, they suddenly moved us into a big barracks-like setup. And I realized, once again, like everything else in life, I took everything good for granted. I didn't appreciate that little cell, because being locked up by yourself at night is bad, but it's really good compared to a big room with 72 beds and, 3 holes in the floor at the far end. And there's always more prisoners than that. So people are always sleeping on the floor or under the bunks or on the downstairs table. Jean-Paul Sartre talks about hell being other people. always people, always watching, always waiting, always aware. That drove me crazy. I mean, a lot of things
So,
drove me. Yeah.
how long until your lawyer at the embassy showed up?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting so ahead of myself. The second day or third day, there was somebody from the American consul who came out. Actually, he was a Turkish guy who spoke terrific English. He worked for the council, and he asked me how I'm doing. Am I okay? Meaning, what happened to you the first night in jail there? Um, he was okay. He worked for the council. He gave me some advice. He gave me some a list of lawyers to look at. A bunch of Turkish names I can't even pronounce. He uh, he pretty much said, "You're going to be here for a while." Everything he told me about my situation was quite discouraging. But I'm wanting good news. He doesn't have any, and I'm glad he didn't give me bullshit because I needed to start facing reality. I didn't do that. I was at college. I was young. I was dumb. I was full of cum. I'd do anything I knew I could get away with until suddenly the world crashed on my head and forced me. Again, prison was the worst thing, but prison forced me to grow up and to take responsibility for my actions and realize I just can't run wild and not worry about the consequences. And the first morning that guy was out of the lockup before they took me to the big prison, he at one point he gave me a pencil and a piece of yellow paper and left me alone in this little locked room to write a letter home to my folks.
Hmm.
And that's when I was forced to face the reality of what I've done. I wasn't thinking about anybody. I could get away with anything. And suddenly I realized I've just put my family in prison. I just 50 years. Every time I talk about it, 50 years later, it gets me. My mom went to sleep with pain in her heart every night because of me. And that shit, that was the hardest part of jail for me. I was 23 when I went in and 28 when I escaped, but I was in good health and I was really strong and healthy. I used to do martial arts and shit. I didn't worry about that part of jail. I mean, you deal with it one and the dirt and such. I don't care about that. What really got me was my parents. All the people who loved me were suffering like I was. And that was one of the many lessons that was forced upon me that I needed to learn about taking responsibility for your actions because you have to live with the consequences. And I never considered the consequences until it was too late.
Did you have any? I mean, did you realize like when the guy from the consulate comes and he's talking to you, are you still saying like, what kind of time am I looking at? Like, I mean, at what point do you realize
I
because
was
I like it in the movie they discuss like, look, well, there's possession and there's trafficking. Like, you want to be charged with possession,
right.
you get 3 or 4 years, you'll be fine.
That's pretty much what happened. Originally, I went to court 14 times. They have a prison system. Again, I took everything for granted. I didn't appreciate the guilty till proven innocent part of American jail. Turkey, is a
Right.
little different. They assign you a percentage of guilt. In my case, it was 100%. And then you
Yeah.
have to argue your way back towards innocence. So I didn't appreciate it, and I thought one way or the other, I'm going to get out. I'm going to go free. That was not happening. I got sentenced originally to 4 years and 2 months, which still left me more than 2 years of prison, which felt like forever. Again, this is the beginning. Now 2 years is different than what it was back then. And one way or the other, I'm going to get out. So I talked to everybody I could. That's a preoccupation in jail. Most jails is everybody's got escape plans. So they know this, if you do this or if you go there. But I literally learned the best escape routes near the Greek border. And there's a river that comes down from Bulgaria, separate Turkey from Greece. I knew if I could swim across that river, again, I'm a swimmer, used to be an ocean lifeguard. And so if I could get off this island, which I know I can do, I can swim one way or the other, I'll get off this island. If I can make it to Greece, I'll be free, because the Greeks and Turks have been, enemies for 1,000 years. They will never send me back to Turkey, not for 2 kilos of hashish. If I killed someone, that's different, which is one of the things I had to consider in the escape plans. Which, do I want a gun? You got money,
Mhm.
you can buy a gun. You can buy anything in jail. If you got money, you can buy a gun. But if I've got a gun and the guard's got a gun, somebody's going to get shot, either me or if I shoot him. aside from the karmic implications of killing another human being, legally, I wouldn't be free anywhere in the world. I'd have to like hang out in Uruguay or somewhere. So I didn't buy a gun.
Well, when you so and I don't know how accurate the film is, but there were a couple of characters that are kind of like your buddies hanging out with you.
Right.
And initially you get like 4 years and you're just kind of sticking it out. You're like, I'm going to stick it out. That's how
Well,
it seems in
not
the
at first.
movie.
When I got the 4 years, I
You're thinking
still
escape.
no. I'm gonna escape one way or the other. I'm getting out, and I
Right.
tried various things. I got myself transferred to a. I've been a lot of places in my life, but nothing comes close to Bakırköy Mental Hospital. It's a big hospital on the grounds of Istanbul, and with big hospital, a lot of different sections. And one of the sections was Section 13 for the criminally insane. You got to do some bad stuff, probably mostly to be a prisoner, to be criminally insane. You got to do some really bad stuff. But for me, that was the perfect place to go because I learned there's a clause in the Turkish law that says if you're judged to be crazy, they can't keep you in prison. But if you're that crazy, they don't put you on the street. They put you in Bakırköy. But I know that's got to be a better place to escape from than the big Samajala prison with the walls and the wire and everything that I've been in all these years. So I got myself transferred to bribed the prison doctor, of course, and got myself transferred to Bakırköy Mental Hospital with the idea of convincing them that I'm crazy. I get a crazy report. They'll keep me there. And the place we were in was it was walled. It was originally a barracks for the Sultan's Janissary troops. That's how old this building was. And the walls were crumbling and the barbed wire on top of it is all rusted and such. But it was a good place for me to escape from. So at least I thought. So I wanted to get to this crazy hospital and convince them and get a crazy report. And then I got there and I looked at the competition. I mean, crazy is just a word until you live in and among crazy, really crazy people. Again, I wasn't too much worried about the physical stuff. I can deal with that. I'm too smart for the tough guys, and I'm too tough for the smart guys. So people pretty much left me alone. My first night that I was locked up in this big prison, this prison trustee guy, this weaselly fuck who works for the guards and tries to run things. He puts me in my very first night, puts me in this bare, empty cell with no blanket, a little metal frame bed with wood planks. And, it was cold. I told this guy, I get a blanket. He says, yeah, tomorrow. And he's fumbling around a big jangly key ring, trying to find the right one to lock the prison. Again, this is 1969, 1970. There's no electronics. There's no internet. They don't have buzzers to open the doors. They got big keys. So this guy's fumbling around this key ring trying to find the right one. And I see he gives up. I don't think my cell is really locked. And I hear him jangle off. And when they jangled away, I hear psst from the next cell. And I open my door. The guy in the next cell, who I actually had met a couple of hours earlier when I first got here, he gives me a stick with a big nail on the end, and he tells me blankets, last cell. A big German guy. So I sneak down to the last cell, and I hook a blanket, and I hook another blanket, and I come back, and I give him a blanket, give him back his stick, close my door, curl up, and collapse on my bed, exhausted from no sleep for 2 days, and I just collapse, and then the door slams open, and this Amin guy come charging into my cell, yelling and screaming. He's grabbing my blanket. And again, I'm not real big, but I used to be very fast and nasty, and I'm scared shitless. And I nail this guy in the face. Bah! He goes down. Oh, fuck. His nose is bleeding. He's screaming for the guard. The guards are rushing in. They're dragging me out. I'm trying to explain in English, which they don't speak. He woke me up. He hit me first. All they know is, new guy. First night in a fight, lesson needs to be taught. And they have a form of punishment in Turkey, all the Middle East, called falaka, where they tie up your feet and drag you up and they beat your feet with a stick. They did that scene pretty good in the movie, scared the shit out of me watching it. And Brad, of course, he said, they were hitting me. Brad Davis, the actor who played me, who I love and I miss immensely, he's long gone now, but Brad said, I found out afterwards. Brad told me, he said that the director, Alan Parker, the guard who was beating my feet with the stick said, I don't want to hurt him. And Alan said, you can hurt him a little bit. We need this. And Brad said he beat the shit out of my feet, got all bruises, but the scene worked because of that.
Right.
And
That's
so,
a great scene, by the way. And what you just portrayed is very well portrayed in the movie.
yeah,
It happens right away. But it's funny. A lot of the scenes that things you're describing, it's not quite in the movie. They do it. The chronological order is different
right.
because I'm sure they have to consolidate
They
and it
did.
has to be more streamlined.
Sure. And they have to, I was in there for 5 years. They got to pick and
Yeah.
choose, just as I did writing the book. What scenes do
Yeah.
I take? When I first came back, I'm a writer. It's what I wanted to do. It's what I always done. It's why I went out into the world to experience life so I could write about it. Surprise, surprise. I got my books published, but not the way I expected them to be. But because he beat my feet and they dragged me back, because this guy, Ziad, I keep changing the names from the book to the movie. There's a late, but this guy walked around the prison with a big black eye and a swollen face, which again, I wasn't happy getting my feet beaten, but that really served me well around jail because, people said, what happened to Ziad? Because his eye got really black. I really hit him strong in the nose. His face went out. And people said, well, the new guy, Willie, which is my name in jail, the Willie. And then they come and they see me. I weigh 150 pounds. They say, this guy beat up Ziad? It was really helpful because if they're looking for somebody to fuck with, they'll pick somebody else. It gave me a little edge. Again,
Yeah.
everything in jail is attitude. And that gave me an attitude that helped me in prison for a while. My feet were fucked up for a couple of days, all bruised and swollen, but a small price to pay for the balance of people left me alone for the most part. Again, I'm too smart for the tough guys. I can talk to them. I can work my way, and too tough for anybody else. I can deal with that. And it gave me a little edge that helped me a bit in jail.
I mean, at what point? So in the movie, you get 4 years and change, right?
Yeah.
And then at some point, I don't know if this was to me killed me because as you know, your time's etching away, and it's what I'm saying,
I
and you
know.
get close to it, and then suddenly you're like, I'm out of here in like 45 days, and
I had
they
a
suddenly
calendar. I was crossing out the days, 56, 55, 54 days prior to going free. The American consul showed up for an unexpected visit. And I think, yay, the Turks will let me out early. And as soon as I see his face, I know it's bad news. I'm worried somebody at home, somebody's sick, somebody hurt my family. Not me. I'm free in 54. I'm out of here in my mind already. I mean, gone. And
yeah.
then he said, Billy, the American consul and the pressure, the Turkish government and the High Court in Ankara has rescinded your original sentence, and now you're going to go back to court and you will be given a life sentence. So that's what I said. So instead of going free in 54 days, I'm now looking at the rest of my life in prison, which the same judge, when they brought me back, I had a chance to speak before being sentenced to life in prison. The same judge who originally sentenced me to 4 years and 2 months was now forced by the high court to sentence me to life. This judge said, I wish I had retired before I had to do this. He held his hands up. He said, kalepshi, meaning like, I'm tied by the high court to issue this verdict. He had to give me a life sentence, the muhabbat life. The only prerogative he had was he could lower that to 30 years, which he did. Thanks, I guess, 30 years life. But, wasn't much of a difference for me. But at that point, I've been in there 4 years or so. I tried the madhouse to escape. I tried other stuff, none of which worked. And at one point, I had my best friend Norman came to help me get out. Seeing how the madhouse was set up with the old broken down walls, I climbed like a squirrel. I could have got up, but I needed somebody on the outside with clothes and a car and a false passport and the balls to come and do this. And that was my friend Norman. So he was working the fishing boats off Alaska. He gave up everything. He came to Istanbul. We talked a little bit. He got a good job in the John Deere tractor factory in Mannheim, Germany, making the money and organizing for what we need for the big break. He had to get a car. He had to get a false passport and so on. Norman was a poet and a writer, and he was the kind of guy that women just wouldn't leave him alone. He's the guy that you'd go out somewhere, you send Norman out, and he'd find three or four girls, and he'd bring them back. They just loved Norman. So he was great, willing to do that. He went to Mannheim. I was constantly with my prison friend, the doctor. Then I got a telegram from Dad saying that Norman was found dead in his hotel room in Mannheim with an army bayonet through his chest. Which, whew, he was.
What?
I got a letter from Norman from Mannheim telling me, we're making plans, writing code and such, but he was telling me how he was boffing the wife of this American Army sergeant from the nearby base. Typical Norman, and somehow or other, the sergeant, I guess, didn't appreciate what was going on and put a bayonet through his chest in his hotel room. The German government at first said that it was. He's got this big bayonet through his chest, and I know this guy. He's not going to commit suicide. He's coming to help me escape. That's how. But he was he was full of life. He was just full of life. But when he died, that pretty much took the bottom out of my world. Things had been bad, but that was the low point. At that point, I realized not only have I fucked up my own life and causing my parents and everybody who loves me daily pain, but now my best friend has died because of me. And I just said, I need to grow up. I need to make some decisions, and I need to take responsibility for me, for what I'm doing. And I turned the escape switch off. I said, I'll do my time. I'll finish my sentence. I'll learn my lesson. Turning
30 years?
No. This is before the situation. This is
Okay.
before I even got the 30 years. This is still 4 years. I had about 2 years plus, and Norman was going to get me out. When he died, I said, you know what? How selfish can I be? I fucked up my life, and everybody who loves me are in jail with me. I'll stop. I'll do my time. I'll take responsibility for myself, and I'll spend the next 2 years here. And I turned the escape switch, which was on from the moment I got arrested. Escape. I turned that off. And that changed everything. Prison literally became a different place. I mean, I'm seeing it with new eyes. I'm a little Japanese guy, Koji, calmest guy in prison. He used to talk to me about trying to get me to live in the moment. He said, just take care each little minute. Each little minute. And apparently the hours and the days and the years take care of themselves. And I remember William James from college philosophy William James said, people can alter their lives by altering their attitudes.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. I altered my attitude, which changed everything. Suddenly, it's weird. I was enjoying prison. I was living in the moment. I was enjoying being alive. And I knew I'll do my time. And it made life so much different. I wasn't always there. I was so anxious. I could be calm a bit. I did yoga every day, and I did meditation. And now that I've only got 2 years or so left, I can handle that. I can just do that. And it changed me. It changed the prison. It changed everything. And I was happy to spend my time and do the time. And, after Norman was gone, I thought, I'm so selfish. I need to change my attitudes. And I did. And that made things very different. I did a lot of writing in jail. I wrote poetry. I wrote story. You did it too. Everybody's in jail. I was a writer before I got there. That's what I did. That's what I always wanted to do. So I have thousands of letters. Every day I wrote letters for more than 5 years. And I've got notes and stuff. And I was putting together what was going to become some kind of book or other. And I was calm in a way that I had not been since I got busted. And that helped. And the days were ticking away. The calendar was ticking. And 54 days, as I told you, that's when the council came and said, bad news. And now you're going to look at going to prison. You're going to go to court. You're going to get sentenced to life. And the escape switch slipped back on because now There's no question. Even my dad, who'd been telling me for all these years, stay calm, don't do anything foolish, don't make it worse than you already have. And, my dad's a smart guy. He was giving me good advice, but even he knew I'm not staying. So two
Yeah.
months later, my dad showed up at the prison. Phew, my dad worked for Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. He taught at NYU. He was teaching early X's and O's, I used to call it. He taught early computer shit. If he had stayed in that, he had a guy who worked with him that met who's going off on his own to get into this IT stuff that nobody even knew what it was back then. And my dad was, I guess he was a programmer to some degree, and he learned how to do that. And this guy wanted him to go with him and start the new company. But my dad had been working for 20, 30 years at the Met, which Metropolitan Life Insurance was, they called it Mother Met, because once you get there, they take care of you, they get your insurance. And he's got 3 kids he's raising, so he couldn't take the chance. Oh, I wish he had. I'd be one of those young rich guys who their dads are billionaires. Maybe it would have changed my attitude towards life. I'd like to have given it a try, but I didn't have the choice. And it God, I get so caught up in this shit. It's been 50 years.
So he showed up. He knew you were going. He knew there's no way this kid's. I coaxed him into staying for the past 3 or 4 years here, but I know damn well he's not dying. He's not going to be okay with dying.
He brought me a photo album. He had cut the back of a big photo album, pictures of my family, my friends, my beautiful sister in a cheerleader outfit. In the back of the photo album, he cut it open and he pasted 27 $100 bills in the back of this photo album, fixed it up perfect, and brought it into me. When you have visits, if you have, normally you're between glass and stuff, but you can get certain visits out in the side room if you got family or the council comes and you talk, and whatever they give you, you have to bring back into the jail. And of course the guards search everything before they take it in. And I had this photo album, and when I went back into the prison, I went past the guards. They said, what have you got here? I said, oh, I've got a gun and some hash. You have to be around for a while. You got to know the guards. You got to be able to play the game. And they kind of like laughed at that. And they looked at the photo album, and I showed him, here's my beautiful sister in a cheerleader. And he said, your father he works in New York. Can I get a job? If I get to New York, can your father get me a job? It's like, guys, whatever you like. And I took the photo album and brought it back into the prison. And I just laid it on my bunk, left it there, showed other people, here's my sister, here's my family, wanting people to see this and feel okay about it, because I didn't want to have to everybody hiding it. Prison is prison is so boring. The same people, the same clothes. We didn't have outfits in prison. Everybody wears their own clothes. So everybody's in their own clothes, and they're talking about the same shit every day. They got the same food, it just becomes so fucking boring. I put the photo up on my bed. I let people go through it and look at it. I wanted them to feel all right with it, because I knew that I'm going to eventually cut out that money and use that money to get out. And that's what I did. And I got myself transferred to an island prison, 26 kilometers off the coast in the Sea of Marmara. And I knew this prison was considered half open. People work there. It's a prison island, and they bring produce. Boats from the mainland come over. Turkey has incredible fruits and vegetables. I don't even know what they are. I know the names in Turkish. And we brought them over, and we on the island, supposedly short-termers went to the island. So they're not going to escape because they've only got a half a year or a year, whatever. I got to the island and I told everybody, and they believed it. They said, you have a life sentence, 30 years? No, nobody gets that. Well, nobody ever got it until I did. And unfortunately, a couple of American women. That's when the Turkish government increased their penalties because of Richard Nixon and the pressure from the U.S. government to increase their drug laws, beginning of the insanity of 30 years of drug laws, putting people away, destroying their lives for cannabis, for fucking pot. I mean, please. So I kept
30,
that.
More like 50.
Yeah. Or whatever you're going to get.
30, that's not 30.
Destroys your life.
They're still giving guys 15 and 20, 25 years for a $10 crack rock.
Pot. Yeah, it's
What are
insane.
you doing? This is some kid that grew up in the projects.
Right.
He's selling crack to on the corner, and
live.
And you just give him 20 years?
Yeah. That's from the day I got home. Whatever else I was talking about, I've always had one message, which is stop putting our kids in prison for pot. You're destroying their life. Everybody who loves them, you're destroying their life. You're crowding the prison. You're corrupting the legal system. The insanity of the war on drugs. I'm still talking about it, and it's almost over, but it's not over. There's still people inside right now as we speak, as you know, and people are getting busted for cannabis, which it's beyond me. Anyway, I had the money. I got myself, I bribed the prison doctor, my buddy now, and he got me on like a mental discharge because I was so crazy having this life sentence, 30-year sentence. And he got me transferred to this island prison, again, 26 kilometers off the coast in the Sea of Marmara. And I knew if I could get there, I'm a swimmer, I'm a lifeguard, one way or the other, I'm going to get out. And I was
Right.
there for a couple of months working, carrying produce and stuff back from the boats would come over from the mainland, unload their produce. We'd bring them up to the canning factory up on the hill, cheap labor, where we did the canning. And then we'd bring the cans back to them and they would take it back. These prison boats, I mean, the boats with the produce, they were not allowed to spend the night on the island because it's a prison island.
Yeah,
Except
yeah.
as I noticed one day, there was a storm building. At lunch one day, I took a break from the cans and I climbed the hill and I was sitting there looking down at the harbor and this storm is approaching. It's out at sea now and the big storm is approaching. And I could see the boats were actually anchoring for the night. And each boat had a little wooden dinghy tied behind. Again, I thought about swimming, and at first, 26 kilometers after 5 years in jail, that's a long way to swim. I was desperate enough. Desperate men do desperate things. I was ready to do anything, but I didn't want to be stupid about it. So I waited and I saw these boats. If I can get, so I had to wait till the next storm. I'd arranged to get past the night bed check. Again, I could go off in all directions. Stop me when you need me to move on. They have a
No, you're good. I mean, I wonder, people listening to this, like to me, to me in prison they have count. Like at 4 o'clock, everybody gets counted.
yeah,
And when you're saying the night bed check, I'm assuming because I'm picturing the unit I was in, and I'm thinking of the CO sitting, the correctional officer sitting in his office at the end of this huge room where all our beds are. You have to basically get past him to get out of the
right,
unit. Not that you could in federal prison. The doors are locked. There's
yeah,
multiple layers of doors. But anyway, so I mean, it's like as you're saying this, I do have a couple questions I want to ask.
yeah.
Can I ask real quick? I was going to wait till
Please.
the end, but I have one
No, no,
basic.
no. Stop me because I just ramble on and then I find something else and suddenly I'm gone. So
No, it's fine.
bring
I'm
me
good.
back.
I'm good. I'm following it, and I like that it's different than the movie. That your version, you're giving better details because some of the stuff didn't make sense. So, for example, in the movie, you've got, I want to say, is it Dennis Quaid? Not Dennis Quaid. It's his brother
His
who
brother,
plays
Randy Quaid.
Randy. He's great. So
Crazy, but great. Yeah.
and he plays crazy in the. Oh, he's crazy in real life too.
Yeah. Yeah, he
Um,
is, unfortunately.
so he and another guy, another great actor.
Brad Davis, John Hurt.
Yeah,
I love
that
John.
was. This is the one in the back where you guys. I want to feel like it's like a restroom area where you guys cut out the blocks
Yes.
and go down.
Right.
I was always wondering if that one, if it was if that is a real thing, and two, the catacombs in the movie. This is a bad scene. It's not good the way they set it up because you guys go down there and you're wandering around. Which one I can't imagine it was as large and clear and clean as it looked in the movie. But two, you guys are wandering around down there, and I guess you can't figure out a way out of this whole thing.
Right.
And then but in the movie, it doesn't show that. It just shows you, it clips from, or the cut is you guys wandering around like, how can we get out of here? And the next thing you know, you're back in the prison, and apparently someone has figured out that these blocks have been removed, and then they start grabbing you guys to.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what happened there. Like it's not a great transition.
Actually, it's not a great transition because that didn't happen. That scene was, again, I wrote notes. When I sat with Oliver Stone for about a week in a hotel room when we got back, and he was crazy, snorting, smoking joints and knocking down Rocky. I loved his energy. He was nuts, but I loved that energy. I told him about something I'd written, which was a short story I'd written about going. It says cut the blocks and going. That prison was on a couple of levels, and one of the bottom levels was the kitchen, and they had like a dumbwaiter that would lift stuff up, and then people would take stuff out. And I wrote a scene where we did that and went down into the catacombs, which were down below. Istanbul, the truth is, Istanbul has catacombs for 1,000 years beneath it. All the streets of Istanbul, it's an incredibly fascinating city. So I wrote that as a short story as part of and Oliver Stone heard it and he said, really? And he included that part of the escape as one of the things that he put in. That's why it doesn't really fit. Again, I didn't have much to say about it. Once I signed the rights to my book, I asked my agent, I said, so once I sign the rights to this book, what's going to happen? What if I don't like the movie? He said, you're done. If you sign that you work with guys in jail. You can get ripped off so easy if you don't know what's going on. I had a good agent. He said, when we sign the contract and they get the book, they'll do what they like. I said, well, suppose they change. He said, you have a little clause in here that says, if you do not like the film, you can take your name off the title. He said, but they're selling the goddamn film on your name.
Yes.
You cannot, whatever they do, they're going to do. I got lucky that I had the people who were involved. The changes that they made that I don't like, that's personal. That's I'm the least objective of viewers of the film. So I think I was lucky because they made a very powerful movie. Brad Davis, the actor, gave his heart and soul to this thing. The music, Giorgio Moroder did this music. People still, they hear that music. It's like Midnight Express. I hear little clips of that music. I'm out somewhere. It's like, holy fuck. That's the music that he put in there. And the acting. And John Hurt, he played the junkie and he had the cracked glasses with the leads cracked. And he was
great.
He was so good. And Brad, again, put his heart and soul into it. Randy Quaid was terrific in this movie. That's before he got too off the end. So I got lucky that the people who did it. And it turned out to be a good film in many ways. It was good for me because, getting out of jail, well, what kind of jobs you're going to get. Previous employment the last 5 years, convict. That doesn't get you a lot of work. And I didn't know how to do anything except write. So I wrote.
I've optioned the life rights to probably 6 different guys' life rights, right? You always have this. It's always that, of course, I've written several books and I've written a lot of synopses, right? So, synopses are like 10 or 12,000 words. They're about double the size of a Rolling Stone magazine true crime article.
They tell the story.
Yeah, they tell the story. They're good. I mean, it basically, you could easily turn it into a script. So what's funny is I'll always get these guys because, of course, I would have them attach their life rights to the project because I'm not spending 3 months or 2 months writing your story. So I can then get out, promote it. Some producer talks to you and then he runs with it. Right. No. So, they always did the same thing. Always the same thing. Well, what if they change it? Well, I want to be able to have controls like stop it. Right. Nobody is going to dump $40 million or $80 million into a movie about your life and then have you doing things like, well, wait, that's not exactly how it happened. Or my car wasn't gray, it was silver. Or I'm like, those little details that mean so much to you don't mean anything and they don't work. Your movie, your 300-page book is about 20 hours of screen time. They have to consolidate that into 2 hours. And they're going to have to remove and conflate many, many stories that you're not going to be happy with.
That's what my agent told me. When I got there, when I said, can I change it? He said, you're done. If you sign the contract, you're finished. Well,
and for good reason.
I wanted to sign the contract. I had no money. I owed my dad. For years, they'd been supporting me and such. So I was thrilled to sign a contract. I was thrilled to have the movie move forward as quick as it did. I just gotten home. I was barely a couple of weeks home when suddenly my agent called. He said, Billy, we have a phone call from Columbia Studios in Hollywood, and they want to fly you out and talk to you about making a movie. It's like, making a movie? Again, I've been in jail for 5 years. Making a fucking movie? It was wonderful. And they flew me out, and I got wined and dined and met whoever. I was in the Columbia cafeteria, and all these famous faces are sitting down and having their lunch and such. And it was wonderful for me. I was so happy about it. When it got to the film, they sat me down in a little screening room in like Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. Columbia had a little room, and by myself in this little room, and they showed me their version of Midnight Express. People said, "Well, could you get how much input did you have?" I said, "None." I mean, when I gave the script to Oliver Stone, that was it. I was done. They showed me the film. I could barely breathe because they made such a powerful film. There were things in it that, the escape was one thing I knew when all of this started is they'll love the escape. I escaped off the island in the storm and the rowboat and running through Turkey, dyeing my hair black, getting to Greece. I mean, it's made for films and they didn't use it, which like I couldn't understand why. I know now how much money it would cost to shoot at night in a rowboat in a storm. And then I asked one of the producer guys, why didn't you? He said, "Billy, what 45 minutes of this film," that's Alan Parker said, "what 45 minutes of this film do you want to cut out to put in your escape? The audience has had enough. Get them out of the fucking theater." And they were making a film about hope and fear and blah, blah, blah. They didn't necessarily want to tell my story. I mean, it was part of it. So I was good with all of that. It was fine. It was what it was. And, I couldn't change it. I didn't have any
Right.
power over it. So don't get excited about things that you can't affect. So I
Yeah.
learned that in jail, one of my lessons. And
So how did you escape? I interrupted you with my
I
question.
I escaped
You
off the island in the rowboat in a storm. I knew when I saw that when I was I got transferred to the prison island with the money my
Yep.
dad smuggled it. My dad, if they caught us, he would have been in jail with me. That's
Mhm. Yeah.
wow. Sorry. Where am I?
So the story, you had to wait for a storm. You
Yeah,
knew they had rowboats. You knew they tied up during the storms.
yeah. And we get back to how do I get past night bed check? The couple of guys like on the island. The guys called Kapadai, meaning these are the big gangster prisoners. These guys live like kings. They literally run the jail because outside they're rich. They got guns. But for some reason, this guy didn't bribe the right guy, and this guy bribed the other guy, and suddenly this guy has to deal with a couple of months in prison, but he'll get out again, and then he'll probably get vengeance on the guys who put him in the normal bullshit back and forth. But for me, I made friends with the number one Kapadai, who these guys at night after bed check would go down to the accounting shed where a couple of nerdy guys with adding machines were toting up the day's canning profits. Because again, we do work on the island. And I'm the only foreigner on the island at this point. I speak pretty good Turkish by now. I made good friends with the head Kapadai, who I always found out the best way is you find the number one guy somewhere and make friends with him. Or if it happens a different way, you catch him in the throat or in the eyes and he goes down, and then other people leave you alone, but now you got to deal with him. I made friends with people. I had to. That was a good way to do it. Again, I'm not real big. I tried not to fight, but I
Yeah.
didn't have to do too much. People pretty much left me alone. And if they didn't, I could deal with it. I could find a way around it. The head Kapadai, he got me permission to be in the accounting shed at night after the night bed check. These guys are drinking Rocky and smoking joints, and they're playing cards and knocking down dominoes. And I arranged with them to be able to be past the night bed check, which means it'll really be morning before anybody really knows I'm gone. Again, this is 1969, 1970, 1975. They didn't have electronics. They didn't have everything was so crude back then. There was no internet. There were no cell phones. It's hard to remember now what life was like back then. But I knew if I can get past the bed check, I can get out to one of these boats. So I waited for the next storm, and it blew and it blew. And I saw the early boats were starting to lock down for the night. And then we finished work. I worked in the canning factories, loading all of the shit back and forth, wanting to get hard and healthy for the escape. And I got down to, once the bed check was coming, I went down to the accounting shed. I'm cool. The guards know where's Willie. He's down at the accounting shed. The head Kapadai, if they have any questions, they'll go ask him. politely because he has way more power than any fucking guard. And he'd say, yeah, he's all right, leave him alone. So they wouldn't bother me. They wouldn't know till the next morning when everything got unlocked and they do a count, what happened to Willie? So I knew I've got the night to get by. And I stayed there a little while, and I told the guys, yeah, I don't feel so good. Have some hash. No, I don't want to. Have some Rocky. No, I don't want any Rocky. I'm going to go back to the barracks and rest. But instead of going back up to the barracks, I make my way down through the cobblestones and the wind and the rain to the harbor. And underneath this little wooden overhang, I climb up at the lip of this big empty concrete vat that's used to hold tomato paste and stuff. But it's empty now. And drop down into the bottom. And and I'm listening and I'm waiting. I want to be sure no other prisoners are around. And I'm thrilled to be this close to escaping and scared shitless. Of course, there's no turning back now. And I waited a little while, and I got my one leg up into the top of the shed, and I hear a noise clattering on the stone beach. And I drop down to the bottom into this little vat, and one of the patrolling soldiers out here patrolling. It's raining, it's nasty, but he's out patrolling. He steps in under the overhang. I can see the flare of a match as he lights a cigarette. I can smell the smoke. He's right on the other side of the wall. I'm thinking stone. Inanimate object, no human vibrations. And after I heard him clatter away, I got to the wall, I went up on the top and it dropped down onto the mucky sand and crawled down towards the water and then slid right into the cold waves and breaststroking my way out again. I'm a swimmer. That's not the hard part, but I was worried about being seen by, somebody in one of the boats that are anchored here or shot. The guard, there's a pier that goes out and there's a place out there where the guards are with guns, but they're not out in the rain. It's the fucking rain and wind. And again, people don't really escape. These guys, most of the people at this prison were short term. They had less than a year or whatever left to go, which their incentive for escaping was almost minimal, which is
Right.
why when I got there, the first thing I said to everybody, I still got a 30-year sentence, but people were like, 30? Yeah, how did you get that? Nobody gets that sentence. Yeah, except me and unfortunately these two women who got it around the same time. I said, the American Council, I'm here for a little while. The American Council is going to help me and take me back to New York, which sounded very logical to people who don't really know. That's not the way things work, especially now with the incentive of the drug laws being pressured. But it made it easier for me to just, nobody was really thinking I'm going to escape from here. So I got out. I swam out. I got the dinghy. I got to one little dinghy and got the oars, and I start to pull, and I'm starting to move out. And the dinghy is when I cut the rope on the dinghy. I had a knife that I'd stolen from the canning factory, and I get the one little dinghy, and I start sawing on this big thick hemp rope, and it won't cut, and it's like fuck, and then I hear whack, and a wooden hatch opens in the boat above me, and this Turkish fisherman leans out and spits out over me into the sea. I'm frozen there. If he looked down, I wouldn't be here now. I'd be dead by now. And then the hatch closes, and I start to saw at the rope again, and it won't cut. And I'm ready to gnaw this fucker apart with my teeth when the rope lets loose, and the dinghy starts drifting back towards the rocks and the guards with the guns. And I grab the oars and discover they don't have oar locks on Turkish dinghies. They have like a little peg in the rail of the boat and the big like pretzel of rope around each oar, and somehow you put it over the top. And I figure it out, but I'm drifting back and forth, and I'm scared out of my mind. But I get a little bit of movement, and the dinghy stops drifting and starts moving out in the other direction, out past the other boats, out of the harbor, away from the prison. And I'm rowing, and I'm stroking a little bit, and trying to keep the oars and and when I look up, I realize I'm past the last of the fishing boats. I'm out into the open sea. I'm free. For the first time in 5 years, I almost lost the dinghy. I almost lost an oar, but I got it together and started rowing. And I knew the island is like a horseshoe-shaped island, and the prison is at the head of the horseshoe. So as I was rowing, I knew, again, I got maps. I knew everything. I knew that's all I had to do. I had a lot of time. I studied. I knew I got to get just opposite Imrali Island and hit the mainland of Asia Minor Otherwise, I'll be swept far south out to sea. In fact, I knew the current was coming from this direction, which is why I had to pull harder on my right oar than my left. And my hand got all bloody. I wrapped the handkerchief around and I kept pulling because I know I want to hit right across and hit the mainland. And I used the lights of the island. So if I was drifting too far, I'd have to pull and get the other way. But pretty soon I lost the lights of the island, and I'm basically lost out here in the rainy night. And I'm rowing and I'm stroking and I'm singing to myself to keep the rhythm. If they catch me, they beat me. Make it, I'm free. Make it, and I'm rowing and I'm rowing. And at one point, these big waves started coming up onto me, big swells. I felt like I was on the back of a rising whale. But far off in the distance, I saw what I think was tiny red blinking lights, and I head towards them. And I'm exhausted but driven, and I'm motivated. I drove 1,000 fucking miles. I was so ready to go. And the night passed, and I was rowing, and then getting us on, and suddenly the dinghy scrapes up in the sand, and a wave listens, and we scrape up again. And I look up into the really pale dawning light, and I see this rocky coastline. It's the edge of Asia Minor. And I know I made it. I made it. I pulled the dinghy up. What I should have done was put a hole in the bottom and sunk the boat, the little dinghy that I got. But I love this little dinghy. I pulled it up on the sand. I hugged the bow of this little dinghy. And the sun was rising and the storm was passing. But far off in the distance, I can see Imrali Island. And I know the clock is ticking. So I started running north along the beach, along the rocky edge of Asia Minor, and it was truly the finest morning of my life. Up against a cliff, I find a puddle of fresh water, quench my burning thirst, washed up the salt, and I make my way around these boulders where the waves are crashing. And up on the cliff top, I see 3 tall, blinking lights. They were my markers during the night. Turns out it was an army base. I go back around the boulders. I climb up on the other side. And this is still Turkey. This is Asia Minor that I got to. And I make my way around the army base through these wooded fields and stuff. And later I come out of the woods, and I can see farmers off in the distance. And the dirt road becomes cobblestones. And up against the plaster wall, there's an old Turk squatting down, smoking a pipe. And I ask him for directions to Bursa, the big town up the coast. And he looks me over, wet, muddy, bloody bandage hand. He wants to know where I learned Turkish. In prison in Istanbul. For hashish? I said, yeah. He said, and now you want more hashish? No, Baba, I don't want hashish. I just need to get to Bursa. He says, well, you take this bus. So I paid, I think, like 12 lira, a couple of dollars for a farmer who had this old Volkswagen bus with all this produce and stuff on the roof. And I got crammed into the back of this bus with all these sweaty peasant farmers. And I'm up against the dirty crack window. They're passing around a bottle of scented water. Like that helps. And we made our way up the winding coast, up to the top, and then back to Istanbul, where I knew I had a friend in Istanbul who'd been in prison with me for a couple of years. He spoke terrific Turkish. He'd become a Muslim, and he owed me big time. I saved him from a bad beating once in jail. I knew some people, they don't care. You never hear from them, most guys. I knew this guy. He'd stand up if I got there. So I get to the hotel, and the little hotel manager, he says, oh, Wolfie, no, you just missed him. He left yesterday, Afghanistan. It's like, oh, fuck, that's the end of my plan. I'm so freaked out. I mean, I have a plan B, but I'm wandering the streets, and I'm blown away by sights and sounds and smells and women and dogs and hair, perfume, hair. I've got really blonde hair and a blonde mustache back then. So I go to see a rank boya, which is a black hair dye. I go to a post office place, and I got some black hair dye. See a rank boy, and I checked into a really funky little hotel down by the waterfront. And I lock the door and press a chair against the door. I check the window for the jump down to the alley, and I squeeze this gooey paste that smells like cat piss onto the little rag, and I'm rubbing it in my hair and my mustache. The hair looks bad. It's all lank and black. The mustache, it was passable. The mustache, it looks so funny, like a big chunk of licorice on my upper lip. I go out, I buy a razor, I come back, I shave it off. Now I got this lank black hair and a kind of raw space covered with whatever, and black all around it. I was a mess. I collapsed into bed and waiting every creak on the stairs. I'm ready to jump out the window. And when morning came, I went down to the bus terminal here, and I knew I wanted to get to Edirne, which is a border town a couple of 100 kilometers west on the Maritsa River that runs down from Bulgaria, separates Turkey from Greece. And I knew if I could get across that river, again, I'm a swimmer, I could get across any river. If I could get to Greece, they would never send me back to Turkey, not for my crime. Again, if I shot someone, killed someone, I wouldn't be free anywhere. So I have the moral karmic implications of killing another human being. Literally, legally, I wouldn't be free. So I got to this little border town, and phew, oh man, it's so long ago, but it's right there. Whew. Um, I got to the little border town. The bus stopped, and I was at a cab stand, and I picked out a young, long-haired Turkish cab driver with an old blue, like 1952 Buick or something. They had all these old American cars in Turkey back in the day.
Mhm.
And so I told him, I said, I'm camping with some friends of mine south of here near the river, and I've gotten separated. Can you take me there? And he wants to know, where did you learn Turkish? I said, in prison in Istanbul. He said, for hashish? I said, yeah. You want to buy hashish? No, I don't want any hashish. I just need to get to the. So he took me down, and we go down and we wind around little windy towns, and he stops at one place and yells up to some people for directions to the campground, which doesn't even exist. And I see a newspaper headline I've got all these pictures, by the way, with a full page drawing of this muscle bound. I should look like this muscle bound blonde guy cutting a rope on a dinghy in the stormy sea. It's like, holy fuck, go, go, go. And we drive down past and we stop again, and the road winds, and he yells at us to some people sitting on a wooden porch of this little bar place up there. And he yells for directions. And this big guy in a blue uniform with a tie hanging loose and a beer bottle in his hand saunters down the steps. He's an off-duty cop. He leans in the window. I can smell the beer on his breath. He said, no fucking campground here. And I'm telling the guy, go, go. We drive a little ways. We get down the dirt road, kind of peters out. And the kid driving the cab, he stops. He won't go any further. It's going to hurt his car. I offer him more money. I tell him, I know my friends are just up ahead here somewhere. So he drives a little ways, and we stop at the edge of this dry cornfield. And I get out and step on the front bumper of his car, and I'm looking west towards these rolling hills, and there's a crimson sun setting back behind the hills, and I know somewhere out there is the river, and that's what I need to get to. So I stayed in the corn until the sun went down. I hear farmers bringing in their sheep or goats or whatever they bring in for the night. I know I'll have to be really quiet. I can hear these tinkling bells in the quiet air. I didn't even swap at the mosquitoes that landed on my face. It was like, drink my blood, because you're not going to get another chance. And when the sun went down, I started moving west up over the hills and the rocky. I'm looking for silence, but the stones are sliding out from under my feet. And I know somewhere up ahead here in the darkness is the river. And I spent a couple of hours making my way up over the hills. And at one point I heard dogs barking. That freaked me out. Not fucking dogs. No dogs, no dogs. And I tore off my stinky old sneakers and socks. I've had these sneakers on for a while now, and buried them at the base of this tree, thinking, smell these, you fucking dogs. And then I climb up in the tree, and I shimmy out on a branch and drop down and scurry away. It shows you how goofy I'm getting, because now I'm barefoot. I'm walking along barefoot. My feet are getting all chewed up, but I didn't care. I was so close. And eventually I make my way up there's a ditch beneath a ridge line. And this is a tough border. I saw little blinking lights on and off in the hilltops. These are soldiers patrolling this border. The Turks and the Greeks are not friends. And I drop down into this little ditch and collapse in the mud, just exhausted, just kind of relaxing a little bit. And I'm just starting to make my way out of the ditch when I hear singing, and drop down into the bottom. And these two Turkish border guards stroll along the top of this ditch, singing little snatches of a folk ditty back and forth to each other. It's Bayram. It's holiday time. They're happy. I'm down in the ditch again. No human vibrations. And when I hear them fade away, I come up out of the ditch and over the ridgeline and down, and more trees and more bushes, and the ground this is all marshland, which is I knew from before. This is where I need to go. There's cities and there's towns, and there's a bunch of marshland in between. I knew if I could get to that marshland, that's what I need. And I start moving forward, and I can. The ground is starting to get muddy. That's good. Muddy is good. That means the river is up here ahead. And I move through some more bushes and trees, and I think I see some like metal glint somewhere. It's tanks crouched down in the woods. This is a tough border. I avoided the tanks. I went the other way. Now the bushes are getting real thick, but I can hear the water. It's getting louder, and I'm moving through bushes, and the branches are whacking me, and I part some bushes, and there's like this black water flowing in front of me in the dark night. And I wade right in, up to my knees, up to my waist, ready to swim, when suddenly the water goes down and I'm climbing a riverbank, and I made it across. But it just can't be that easy. And it's not. It's just a little river. I part some more bushes. There's the real river, the Maritas River, stretching down in front of me, running down from the Bulgarian mountains to the Adriatic Sea. And on the other side is freedom. The river has that's the border, but over the years, rivers change their banks, so the border has changed, and I wasn't really sure where the border was. I just knew if I could get across that river, so I wade right in. And I'm a swimmer. I'm not worried, but I'm swimming, and I'm trying not to make too much noise, because whether it's a Turkish bullet or a Greek bullet shooting me in the water, it's the same. So I'm trying to be quiet, but then it's like, fuck quiet. I don't want to drown out here. So I'm kicking and stroking, and I make my way. My knee hits a rock, and my feet find the bottom, and I brace against the current and drag myself up on this riverbank and collapse on my back, staring up at the stars, and this wild, giddy burst of joy bursts out of me. But I'm exhausted. I'm sleepwalking now. I'm tired, and I'm cold, and I'm hungry, and again, I don't want to go up to the first guy I see and have him be a Turkish border guard. So I avoided anybody. And later on, I come out of the woods to this dirt road, and again, I know I shouldn't be on it, but it feels so good on my bare cut up feet. And then some dogs come barking up. I think I see a farmhouse, and the dogs come barking up, and I rush away from the dogs. And I say, I got to get back in the woods, and I'll do it just up ahead. It's like a tunnel through some trees. And I say, I'm going to get back in the woods just past that. I didn't realize at the time, it looked like a wooden kiosk, an outhouse. And suddenly I walk past it, and this bayonet slashes down in front of me. And that's what you do when somebody sticks a bayonet in your face. You put your arms up. And this guy yells something at me, and I didn't understand him. And he yelled again, and I realized I don't
That's
understand.
a good sign.
And I speak pretty good Turkish, which means he's speaking Greek, which means I made it. I collapsed on the ground with this big shit-eating grin on my dirty face. And this border guard, he's blowing his whistle, and other guards come out, and they got flashlights around me in a circle. And this one cop guy, he puts his pistol in the light. He says, "Who are you? Who are you?" I said, "I'm an American. I just escaped from Turkey." They kept me in a little room in the woods for 12 days while the Greek government decided what to do with me, because again, they don't know what to do with me. But I knew once I got to the Greeks, they're going to be fine. And they put me in a little room, and actually the next morning, this Greek military intelligence officer comes in to question me, and he's got the bushy eyebrows and his piercing eyes, and speaks great English, and he starts asking me all these questions. It's like, wait, stop. People have been pushing me around, asking me questions for 5 years. I'm an American citizen. I know my rights. I demand to see the American consul. I know my rights. This guy just looks at me, blows some smoke. He hits me with a cigarette. Boom. Let me tell you your rights, kid. We find you coming out of a totally restricted military zone. You got no papers. You got no shoes and socks.
Everybody needs a good pair of jeans. What I like about the Perfect Jean is that the moment you put them on, they feel like sweatpants. They don't ever pinch or bind up. As a matter of fact, they're super stretchy. There's never any point where you feel like they're binding up on you, or they're tight, or they pinch you or anything like that. They're comfortable in pretty much any position that you sit in. They're really great. They're comfortable, and they look great. And the best part is our listeners get 15% off their first order plus free shipping at theperfectjeans.nyc, or Google The Perfect Jeans and use promo code COX15 for 15% off. Normally, a good pair of jeans costs anywhere between $150 to $200, but The Perfect Jeans are reasonably priced at $79.99. For a limited time, our listeners get 15% off their first order plus free shipping at theperfectjean.nyc and use promo code COX15 for 15% off. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectjean.nyc with promo code COX15. Please support our channel and tell them we sent you. F your khakis. Get the perfect jeans.
Covered with mud. We could take you and throw you back across the river to the Turks. We could take you out in the woods and shoot you. Nobody would ever know. Or you can shut up, cooperate, and we'll send you home. It's like, well, what do you want to know? He's asking me about the insignia on the uniforms of the soldiers on the island and about the radar base on top of Imrali Island. And these tanks I told him I saw in the woods. He's got a detailed map. I show him, here's where I think I saw the tanks, and here's where I think I crossed the river. He said, you're a very lucky man, William. I said, yeah, I know. He says, no, you don't know. All this land, we think, is mined. Mind. Later, when I got home, my old grandma used to say, oh, actually, my mom first would say, God looks out for saints and fools. And then my granny, when we'd go to bingo with my mom, she would tell everybody, this is my grandson, Willie. He was up the river, Alcatraz in her mind. He was up the river for a while, but he's home now. My mom was like, I don't know who this lady is. But they treated me pretty well. They decided at some point that they contacted the American government. They found that what I told them was the truth, and they did the best thing they can do. The Greek government deported me as being a bad influence upon the youth of Greece, which is the same charge against Socrates. Bad influence upon the youth of Greece. I loved being in that category. And eventually I got a plane from there. I flew to Amsterdam. Actually, I did a little in between, which I leave out of most of the story because it's too long. I flew to in West Germany. Anyway, eventually I got to Amsterdam, and I knew if I'm going to be safe anywhere in the world, it'll be Amsterdam. They're not going to worry me. And I get to the customs, and the plane stops, and I just passed through customs. They signed. I got a passport. The American consul came out, got a passport with that black hair that I dyed myself. In fact, the passport picture has that black hair on it. I spent a couple of days in Amsterdam, just incredible. And I knew I'm free now. Once I got here, I'm free. And I hung a little while in Amsterdam, a couple of days, and got my hair dyed. I went out and dyed my hair blonde again, and got it cut short and dyed blonde, which is how it used to look. And my first morning of freedom in Amsterdam, I wandered out I found myself at the Rijksmuseum, and I was in front of this Van Gogh painting called Prisoners Exercising, where a circle of convicts are marching around the stone prison courtyard. And in the foreground of the painting, this blonde-haired prisoner, like Van Gogh had his red blonde hair, is staring out at the viewer, staring out at me while I'm staring back at him. And I know what it feels like behind his eyes. And I flip into the painting, and I'm staring out at myself on this amazing, wondrous Amsterdam morning. And there's tears in my eyes as I back away from the painting and leave him hanging there and move out into my life. Whew. I know I didn't answer one of your questions, but I told you.
No, you answered all. You answered
all this stuff.
No, I am wondering. So when you fly back, you said you flew back, and there's tons of did you realize you were flying back and that your story had hit the media? And
well, what I knew was Long Island newspaper, Newsday. I was, local boy goes bad. They picked up my story 5 years earlier when I first got arrested and got my 4 years and 2 months sentence. So I was in the papers and blah, blah, blah. When my sentence was changed to life in jail, that's when the press hit, and every newspaper had this story. I was probably the first American who got a life sentence out of all of this increased drug penalties. And that made a big deal. So they were following the story. My lawyer at the time, Mike Griffith, he was sort of my PR guy. And he arranged when I told I got somehow found these guys and told them what flight I'm on. And he arranged to be at the airport. And so when my plane landed, I got off the plane. Actually, a guy came on and up in front, and he said, Mr. Hayes. And I'm thinking, it's the police and they're going to fingerprint me. I hate getting fingerprinted. I hate that fucking ink on my hands. And I said, "You're with the police, I assume?" He said, "No, no, no. I'm with Pan Am. Follow me, please." And he takes me down some side door. I didn't even go through customs, which had me thinking, no, no, don't think like that anymore. And he led me downstairs, and there was my father and my brother. Whew, to see them and have my dad hugging me and my brother hugging me. My mom, she stayed home. We didn't want her to be in the middle of this. She never came to visit in prison. I didn't want her to see me in jail. It was okay for my dad and my brother, but I couldn't have dealt with my mom seeing me in jail. So, but we got home and we got in the car. We did this press conference. People are asking me all these questions, and I've watched it a bunch of times. I realized I got my arm around my dad's shoulder. I needed something solid to just anchor me here. And people are asking me all these questions and yelling and screaming. It was crazy, but it was good crazy. Again, all of the difficulties that I experienced when I got home, relative to where I'd been, I'll deal with press con, but whatever. I got to the house. There were 20 reporters. We live in Babylon out on Long Island. There were 20 reporters waiting in front of the house. I see my mom looking out at the front door. I hadn't seen her in 5 years. I wanted to go up, and I had to get through. Guys, leave me alone. Get through this pile of reporters just to see my mom. And that was the first. That's when I knew I was home. When I sat down at the kitchen table and my mom made some roast beef, and my old grandma cooked rice pudding for us. And that was my first weekend at home. The phone, we had to take the phone off the hook because it just kept ringing. If I could have gotten away from all that, I probably would have. But I not only couldn't, I shouldn't. I needed to get, what am I going to do now? I owed a lot of money. I don't know how I'm going to pay people back. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. People say, "What are you going to do now?" It's like, I told them, I guess I'm going to write a book, because that's what I was doing. I was a writer, and I didn't know what else to say. I don't do anything else. That's the only thing I've ever known, is to write and to act. So I talked to people on the phone, and by Monday I was meeting literary agents and a couple of pretty big name writers. I don't have to mention them, but 2 or 3 of them turned out to be total douchebags. And then I found Julian Bach, this agent. He was like an avuncular, like our Mr. Chips. And I met him in his office, and I look up on the wall, and he's got a picture of him running around the loop in Central Park. And I'm a runner. I used to run marathons and shit. So I loved this guy right away. And he's the guy that hooked me up and started talking to people. And he made a deal with E.P. Dutton, was a big publisher back at the time. And he's the one that we just started that. He said to bring me something. So I knocked out about 12 pages. Next day, I gave him the 12 pages. And he read all of this, and he said, "Well, Billy, this is very good, because now we know we need a professional writer." I said, no. I went to Marquette. I went to journalism school. I could write this. He said, yes. But your style, he termed it the hysterical subjective. He said, your style might work for, Rolling Stone and your immediate peers, but we need to get beyond that. You need to write a book that's going to be able to go out everywhere if you're going to make any money off this, which, again, I needed to make some money. So he focused me down. We met a couple of writers who I didn't like much, and then I met a guy who I liked instantly. And he kind of reminded me of my wife. He was calm and steady, but he never let up. My wife's like that. She's calm and steady, but she's the stubbornest human being I've ever met, which is good for me. And we started to work. And the first thing we did was he sat down, he turned on a tape recorder and had me babble like I'm doing here for about 2 days. And then they went and transcribed it. I hate to be the girl who had to go transcribe this, because I speak back and forth, and I've got these, and we put it all together. It was a humbling experience to read how I speak in line. But that we chopped up into pieces. And he said, so look, what he gave me, I'm a writer, I'm good at that, but I didn't know where to go with this. I've been in jail for 5 years. Where do I start it? And there's so many characters, there's so much stuff. It was overwhelming. And Bill said, come. Here's what we do. We start it here, which you get arrested, and we end it here when you escape. All we got to do now is fill in the middle. And that's what we did. I couldn't mention Actually, when I got home, my lawyer, Michael Griffith, he said, "What are you going to do now?" So I'm writing a book. I want to talk about, all my stuff and my first three escape, my first three smuggling trips, and all the good stuff in between, because I was running wild. In between the trips, I was in Europe, I was in Spain, I was riding motorcycle, I was running with the bulls. It was a wonderful time for me. He said, wait, you want to write a book and mention your first three smuggling trips? I said, yeah, why not? I want to tell the truth. He said, one more question. Are you out of your fucking mind? You can't say that. I said, why not? He said, I said, they have no proof. They can't do anything for me. He said, they don't need proof. The Turkish government, you're an escaped convict drug smuggler. The Turkish government is going to ask for your extradition. And the US government is either going to say yes or no. And you want to publicly say to the government, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. I made three smuggling trips before I got busted. He said, you cannot talk about any of those first three trips, which certainly made a little logical sense once I thought about it and I spoke to other people. But what it made difficult was writing the first book, because I had to start my book where the fourth smuggling trip happened and then escaped. I couldn't mention the first three, which made it a little difficult because I spent a lot of time in Istanbul. I made a Turkish girlfriend. I loved my first three trips. It was an amazing city. It still is. It's changed a lot in 50 years, but it was a wonderful, magical place for me. But it made it difficult to write the first book. But getting the first book done and out of me, I had a lot of people say, you should seriously consider some therapy. I said, I don't need therapy. I'm fine. I'm free. I so needed therapy. And the writing became the therapy because as the words came out, they kind of stuck to the page. And Bill was, again, like my wife, just calm and steady, but never gave me an inch. He said, wait a second. You're saying this and this, but I had all my letters. I wrote 1,000 letters. People kept all of my letters. And when I got back, I got calls and emails. There was no email. I got calls from people saying, I've got 20, 30 letters here from you. You want me to? And they all sent me my letters, which was great because I used that as the basis for the book. And we divided everything up, and Bill got me the order. You start here, you start there, and then we used these letters to fill in the middle. So he'd say, "Now wait a second, you just wrote," because I'd write 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 pages, and I'd send it to him, and he'd look at it, put some red lines, and we'd go back and forth like this. That's how we worked. And he said, "You're saying this and this and this here, but I've got this letter from that very time where I was saying blue, 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 blue." He said, "Your letter is saying red, red, red. I need the guy. I don't need the guy who's out here now getting laid and he's famous and he's on TV and he's happy. I need the guy who wrote the letters back in prison, who was desperate. That's where you need to get back to." I didn't want to go there. I wanted to talk about it. I didn't want to feel it. I didn't want to really get into how desperate I was. But he never let up. He forced me to keep going. And every day I'd have the last thing we did, he said, "We're done except for," I believe it was chapter 9, which was the madhouse. What I mentioned to you, when I went to the crazy house and what was going on there. He said, you haven't done this yet. I said, but he said, "We're done. You need to write that chapter." So I was like, all right, fuck it. So I went back. Basically in 2 hours, I wrote all chapter 9 with hardly any changes and gave it to Bill. And he said, "Okay, but this is terrific. We're done." And then Julian took it and the book got published, and suddenly I was really out there. I'm doing the Today Show, and you do book publicity, and that back then. Now you got to publish your own self-publishing, which it's hard. You get the money, but it's hard. Back then, E.P. Dutton set me up. They'd tell me, "You go here, you go there." They'd send me a car and bring me to the studio, and I talked about it endlessly. And the book was hardly even out when Julian called and he said, "Billy, they want to fly you to California and Columbia Pictures. Peter Guber, head of Columbia Pictures, wants to talk to you about doing a movie."
Nice.
It was nice, but it was so strange. Movie. Again, I've been in jail for 5 years. I've been out for a couple of months, and now I'm flying to California to talk about a movie, which, again, when I'm hot, I'm really hot. And when I'm not, I'm really not. I was not hot for 5 years. And suddenly I got hot again, and it kept going and it kept getting better. And suddenly there was a movie, and the movie premiered. I busted, and I was arrested in October 1970. I escaped in October, just missed my 5th anniversary in October 1975, and pretty soon the book was finished, and I was sitting in a room with Oliver Stone, telling him this story, and he was taking notes and snorting, drinking Rocky, and whatever he was doing. And then he went off into the mountains and wrote a script. And then there was a movie, and the movie premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, which usually doesn't happen for some little small film. But these producers, they had some balls on them to do that, and they premiered the film at the Cannes Film Festival. And I was sitting in my seat, and the movie came on, and for 2 hours I was caught between the memories behind me and the movie in front of me, and I kept sliding down further and further in my seat. It was when the film ended, there was like, boom, the film ended, and there was silence. Peter Gruber, I heard him later talk about it. He said, I'm sitting with David Putnam, the other producer. He said, the film ends, dead silence. I look at David. He looks at me. We're thinking they hated it. We like, let's get out of the theater quick. Suddenly, the lights come up and the audience stands up and starts cheering and screaming. And I'm like, whoa, because this was just such a weird thing. But it was wonderful in so many ways. And at the after party across the street, where they had Rona Barrett, that's how long ago this was. She was the host, interviewer. Rona Barrett is asking me and stuff, and I'm in the middle of this big thing, and people are dancing, and they're in the tuxedos, and it's the after show thing. It was okay, but in jail you don't want to be the center. Well, again, I'm saying this. You don't want to be the center of attention. I always wanted to have my back against the wall in jail. I want to know what's in front of me, what's around me, and now I'm surrounded by people, and they're yelling and screaming. And it was good, but it was just freaky. I wanted to get away from all this. And I look out, and there's music playing, and I see this kind of blonde-haired angel moving across the floor. And she puts out her hand and asks me to dance. And I take her hand, and I take her in my arms. And I've been married to her for 44 years. Again, prison was the worst. Very nice. Prison was the worst and the best thing that ever happened to me. And so from there, I can stop. You asked.
Well, I mean, what did you do? What industry did you go into? Did you continue to write?
I wrote, and then in the course of the writing, I had some friends who said, in fact, it was Brad Davis, the actor, who told me about an acting teacher. And he said, you need this guy. And I went to this acting teacher, Eric Morris, who he was known as the Mad Dane. He had this crazy style, but he was a wonderful teacher. He looked at me. He looked right through me. He knew all my bullshit. I'm good at talking and being glib and covering stuff up. He saw right through all my bullshit. He said, yeah, you talk about this stuff and stuff, but you gloss it over. You don't really get down into what's going on. I said, well, of course I do. And I wrote a book. He said, no, you don't. You cover it up. You don't want to touch. There's stuff that you don't want to deal with. And he said, if you're going to become an actor, you need to touch that. That stuff is your gold, G-O-L-D. And if you can't deal with it, if you can't bring it up, don't waste your time or my time here in this acting class. I said, you're wasting your time. Fuck you. I'm telling you the stuff. This is all real. He said, no, it's not. You're covering up and blah, blah, blah. We're screaming and yelling. We would leave class. I'd be saying, fuck you. I don't need you. He says, you need me like air. You need this class like your air. Like, fuck you. And I get in my car and I start to drive, and 2 blocks away, these tears start pouring up. I got to pull the car over. Tears are running down my face. This is such a strange thing, because all of this stuff that had been locked up in there was really starting to break out now. And it was overwhelming. But I met Eric and I met Wendy right around the same time. And between the two of them, I was lost, or found, actually, because he forced me to deal with it, and she saved my life. She makes my heart sing, still does, 44 years later. So I began acting, and I started to do a lot of theater. I've done weird films. I was in Assassination. I got shot to death by Charlie Bronson, which I loved. Machine gunned to death by Charlie Bronson in this movie, and a lot of strange, weird movies, but mostly theater. And I loved, and I still do. I did a lot of theater, and I just started to direct a lot of theater, and I did that for I'm still doing that. I mean, recently we I wrote a show called Riding the Midnight Express with Billy Hayes. You want to use the plugs, you use all the plugs we got. And it was me telling the story. It was about 75 minutes. A producer who I'm now still working with, she said, she called me one day. She said, we've been working on the script of the play. And she said, Billy, somebody just dropped out of the last three. This is 2013. She said, somebody just dropped out. I had a spot for the last 3 nights of the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which is the big theater marketplace in Edinburgh, Scotland. And he said, we have the last 3 nights, and would you want to do your show now? I said, well, sure. I said, when is this? He said, 2 weeks. It's like, 2 weeks? No. I've got about 150-page script. He said, you just got to cut this down, and you got to make this 70 minutes or whatever. That's all they allowed in the initial stuff. So I had to cut it down. I was working back and forth every day. Suddenly I'm in Edinburgh, and it's my turn, and I walk out onto the stage, and it's sort of a big auditorium, then bleachers going up like this, and I walk out onto the stage, and the whole place starts clapping and cheering, and they're standing up, and I've got people are yelling and screaming. This guy in the front row does this to me and shows me he's got a joint in his hand in the front row. That's when I knew that it's okay, and I got to do my show in front of this audience, and their response was amazing for me. It made me realize I need to do this. I'm not healed. I'm whatever I am. I need more, and I've been talking about this story. A lot of folks have said, Jesus, well, don't you want to stop talking about this shit? Forget about it. No, actually, I learned some valuable lessons that you don't forget. You don't get eaten up by them, but you don't forget them. You have to use them. And this was the beginning of me talking about my story, which I was doing this on the road. We did it for, 2013. We did it for about 6 years. I was in New York a couple of times. I was upstate in Rochester, New York, or 6 times they brought me there. We did the show in London and in Scotland and in Beirut, Lebanon. I did the show in Melbourne, Australia, traveled the world telling my story, which, again, I guess I need this because I'm still doing it. I'm doing it here. I'm telling you my story. It became the focus of my life. No matter what else I was doing, everybody remembers Midnight Express. People don't know I did X, Y, and Z. They don't know that I was in this movie. It's like all they know is Midnight Express, which is what it is. I should have bigger problems than that. This was so good for me.
Yeah. No, not a bad life.
No. Well, you take what you learn. You took it while you were in jail. You were learning it and using it, and now still using it in your life out here. And I'm still doing the same thing.
Yeah. I was gonna say I've had a guy that I was talking to at the gym one time that knew me beforehand, and he had said, "Boy, you've really turned this into something, haven't you?" And I said, "Well." I mean, I you got 2 choices. You can run from it or you can lean into it. And I said, so I decided everybody else I know in prison is they're planning on, they're getting out and they're going to run from what got them into prison. And I said, I'm just not going to do that.
It doesn't work. You cannot get that far away from it because it's still there, and it's going to stay there in ways that probably aren't healthy for you if you're not getting it out or using it. Actually, it never goes away, but I find a way to use it now. So I'm very emotional when I talk about my mom and that kind of stuff. But it's good emotions. It's healing in so many ways. And
I get the same way.
Yeah, I know. That's why you're still doing what you're doing, which is good for you and good for the guys in jail who you were trying to help. Because I know that no matter how good their story is, they're going to get ripped off if they're not careful. Even if they are careful, they're going to get ripped off. So I think you were an intermediary for them in the biz, and maybe try and help them make this work. Most guys in jail are not terribly literate, as it were, or aware of how to do business in the entertainment field like that. So I got lucky. Again, I was really lucky. Not for a while, but then I got lucky again. And I'm still lucky. I'm the healthiest guy I know. I got lucky because in the summer of 1969, I discovered yoga. And I've done yoga every day for the last 60 years, more than that. And I'm the healthiest guy I know. knock on everything.
Do you have anything else you want to cover?
Can you see that? Midnight
What is
Express,
it?
Midnight Express, find your freedom. It's cannabis.
Okay.
I'm working with a company called Pharmaceutica, and they've got a line of product that a big company. They do a lot of healthcare, pharmaceutical wellness, and I'm now working with them, and they're going to represent my Midnight Express Find Your Freedom, which is my wife designed this whole box for me. So this has got our story in it, and I'm back in the cannabis, which
Well, what's in it? What does that carry? Is it like a
this
what do
one
they
is
call
CBD and
it? CBD?
CBG hemp pre rolls, but they're also doing, it's one plant, less than 3% or 0.3% THC. You can classify it as hemp, which
Mhm.
basically is all going free now. But it used to be you could sell something because it was less than 3%, 3 points of THC, and they made it legal and they could call it hemp and sell it. They're going to be doing a line of hash, which is perfect for me. So we'll have my Midnight Express Find Your Freedom hash out on the market. And I wish my dad was still alive, because the look on his face would be, "You're doing what? Didn't you learn anything?" It's like, "Yes, Dad, do it legally and make some money off it, as opposed to wreck my and everybody who love me their lives." I'm doing that, and I've got some. What else? I've got a TV show out now called Greatest Prison Escapes with Billy Hayes, and it's 10 episodes. We shot it before COVID. That's what we started, and they got 10 episodes, and it's on. Where do they have it up on Amazon? I believe they have it up now. Greatest Prison Escapes, which is stories of, and I'm the moderator, as it were.
Right.
It's
The
perfect job
host?
for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say the host thing you'd be a great host for, and it sounds like very very similar. My favorite kind of like true crime documentary series is Locked Up Abroad.
They did my version.
Oh, did they? Have you ever? Have you? So you've seen those? That's probably the best.
Yeah.
Those are probably the best. They've got some that are super cheesy. They do a really good job for
Yes. No, no,
I mean, it's probably the best one I've seen.
I was very happy about what they did in terms of telling my story, because other people have tried and they were really good. Well, they had some money and they were really professional. And everybody who's seen my Locked Up Abroad story said they did a great job, which they did. I was very happy to see that come out.
Yeah, I love the reenactments. I love the way they cut it with the they do a great job cutting in with the real
Yes.
the subjects,
Yeah. Yeah. They're
So
good at that. And it was around that time also. They a Danish ballet troupe did the Midnight Express ballet, which again, all my New York friends are like, "Fuck 'em, New York ballet. Would they make you wear a tutu on the show?" It's like, but they did a wonderful job, and they flew me and Wendy to London in the huge, I forget, a spectacular old theater in London, and we got to see the ballet of my story, which again, I'd like that my dad to hear, like, "What ballet?" Because from going from the worst thing that happened to me, strangely enough, to the best thing. Prison was the worst and the best thing that happened to me, and it's still going on. It's still working.
hey, you guys, I really appreciate you watching. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this. Also, we're going to leave Billy's social media links in the description box, and I'm going to ask him if he has a link to the website that sells his hemp product. If he does, I'll leave that in the link also. Once again, really appreciate you watching. Thank you very much. Please share the video, hit like, subscribe. Thank you. See ya.